Hi, my name is David and welcome to my new channel. Today we're gonna talk about my story, going from ADHD to drug addiction to crime to then coming to sobriety and embarking on the path of finding myself, becoming who you really are. Because my journey started 31 years ago, and you can ask my mother. It really started the day I was born, because I was born with a very severe ADHD, which made me quite a cumbersome child, because I could never sit still and I was never quiet, and whatever you told me to do, I do the opposite. And so this of course caused a lot of trouble for me and for the people around me. And so the peers in my age, they started taking distance from me because I was so crazy, and parents was always mad at me, teachers were always mad at me, everybody was just mad at me all the time. And I never really understood why, because I was in my own world and I never really understood what I did wrong. And I think it took until about I was in 4th grade where I started rejecting the world, and I started rejecting people, and I didn't like the way I was met because I didn't really understand why I was met the way I was. And I was also teased and bullied when I was younger, and so about this age I made an oath to the world and to myself that I would become a person that would never get bullied again. And so, I did all the necessary things for that, which is get a mohawk and start listening to Iron Maiden and Metallica and wear rock band t-shirts and smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol and all the things that makes you accepted and liked by your peers. But it wasn't until I was 13 years old when things got really serious, because this was the time when I found opiates. And something very profound happened that day, because when I took opiates, for the first time in my life, I was free. Because my whole life I had all these ants crawling under my skin and my head going crazy, and I can't sit still and I can't shut up and everybody's mad at me, and I'm just filled with insecurities and fears, because I was a very sensitive child. And so when I did these opiates, all of those things, they just fell away. And for the first time I felt freedom. And back then I thought I found the answer. I thought I found the one thing that was gonna save me, the one thing that's been missing my whole life. Of course, little did I know back then that the one thing that was giving me life was gonna take it away from me. Because it didn't take long until I was out on the streets. I was shooting up oxys and other strong opiates, heroin and amphetamine and pills and alcohol and just anything I could get my hands on. I was devouring it. And I got very deep into crime. I was selling drugs to pay for my drug habit. And I hanged out with a lot of, I wouldn't call them bad people, but they certainly wasn't a good influence on a young, wild man like myself. And this went on for about 10 years. I was in and out of rehab, and at the end of it, I was done. I was homeless. I slept at the train station multiple nights, and most of my sane friends, at least, had left me. And I've been dead from overdose, and I was in really bad shape. But again, I've been in bad shape many times before, and I've been to rehab many times before, but this time when I went, something was very, very different, because this time when I went, something profound happened. And because I came to the rehab and I was in so bad shape, I was sweating, had withdrawals, had to go to the hospital because of seizures. But even though all of that, I had zero doubt. There was no doubt in me that my past life is done and that a new chapter is beginning, because I had a vision. I came to the rehab and I had a vision, and I just saw myself using all of this knowledge that I've gained, all these experiences, to help other people. And I was a completely different man in these visions. I was strong and I was confident. And so when I went to this rehab, there was no doubt, and the only thing was about becoming this person that I've seen, because I knew that was the real me. So I came to rehab, and the first thing was of course the drug addiction. Getting rid of that. The withdrawals took some time, but the first real pressing issue was my social anxiety, because I couldn't really have a conversation with another person. I looked them in the eyes, I got nervous, I'm sweating, I'm stuttering, and it's very, very awkward. And I knew I can't have this. I'm gonna save the world. So we have to get rid of this. And so I thought, what is the most scary thing? What's the biggest fear that I have? So I thought, well, that's probably talking in front of a group of people. To have a group and to present myself somehow and everybody's looking at me. And so back then I was living at a halfway house. And a halfway house is somewhere where you live after rehab. And it is much like a home and like a rehab, but more open. And so you live there with other people who've previously had problems with addiction. Once a week there will come students to this place, and the owners of the halfway house, they would present what they're doing there to the student, because these students, they were studying something to do something similar. And so I asked the people, well, could I join? Can I come and just present myself? And they said, yeah, sure, you can come. And so I went there and I stood in front of all these people and I started talking, and I was stuttering and I was sweating and I was just looking in the ground and I was mumbling and I didn't look anyone in the eyes, and it was a fiasco. It was horrible. It was the worst thing that I've ever faced in my life. You know, quitting heroin, easy, super easy. This was the real deal. And so I continued doing it. I did it the next week and the week after, and I got a camera and I started filming myself and watching it afterwards, which is like the most cringe thing you can ever do. And I had a little paper and I was writing down the things that I did wrong, and then I tried to do better in the next one. And I had a big mirror and I was practicing in front of this mirror. I was practicing, you know, how to move like a human, you know, because a big thing for me was like, well, you know, what do I do with my hands? And I was looking at people like, what are people doing with their hands really? And so, you know, I was practicing that, you know, where do you put these guys? And I think it took about 6 months until I was lecturing in front of hundreds of people, and I was getting very well paid for it. I got the opportunity to be on newspapers, on television, on radio shows. I got to coach a lot of people. I was doing workshops at social institutions and schools, and you know, it was an amazing time, because all of these things wasn't things that I wanted to do. I didn't like to be in the spotlight, but I felt like there were things that I wanted to do, in a sense, because I wanted to get the message out there and I wanted to be able to help people, and I wanted to become a person who can do these things. And so I broke through the barrier, you can say. And I was doing this for many years until Corona came. And of course, when Corona came, it came also with the restrictions. And so all my coaching and all my workshops and all my lectures was shut down. And I had a full calendar for about a year, and now it was completely empty in a week. And so I got very much into doing business, and I left Finland and, you know, doing all these different things which were going very well for me. However, one day I woke up and something happened which again was going to change the whole trajectory of my life. And because I woke up, and from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, I was just covered in eczemas. And these eczemas, they were itching. I was itching and it was bleeding, and I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to go outside. I couldn't really do anything because it was so overwhelming, and it didn't stop. And this was the time when I got really into spirituality. And I've always been kind of into spirituality, you know, either to the dark forces or the light forces, but you know, either way, it's been a direction. But now I started taking it very seriously, because my friend, he bought me this book, and I opened the book, and you know, it was some Joe Dispenza, you know, energy work, manifestation. I don't remember really, but you can think what you want about those things. But I opened the book and I started reading it, and instantly as I started reading it, the eczemas on my body, they started getting better and they started fading away. And that was enough for me to know that, okay, this is the path that I should take. And so I started walking that path. I started practicing very diligently and every day, because I find it very profound that you have these thousands and thousands of years old scriptures, and thousands of them that keeps on being written over and over again with these similar instructions, with people having the similar experience, hundreds of thousands of people over thousands and thousands of years, millions of people perhaps, all of them having these experiences, and still people of today's time are saying like, you know, it's just some woo-woo, you know, they're just making it up. Like, really? Are you sure about that? All these people, all these scripture people having these experiences and then given their whole life to just sit in a monastery and practice, like just on a belief? Sounds like a very naive way of thinking, was what I thought back then. And so that's really how I took it. Not as a belief or a faith or something to lean on, but just as an instruction book. Because they told me, you do these things, you have these experiences, and you make up your own mind. And to me, that was a fair deal. And so I dedicated myself very hard to doing these practices every day for long periods of time. And I had these experiences and they were so profound, more profound than I could ever imagine. And you know, something happens to you, you change and you remember and things start falling away and you start seeing through so many things. And you realize how much of all of it is just ideas. How much of it is just concepts, like who you are, who I am, what I like, what I dislike, what I do, what I don't do, the society believes, like everything is just thoughts. It's just voices in our heads, really. It doesn't exist. And once you realize these things, you become just a little bit more happy. Because things aren't so serious anymore. It's more fun and everything turns more into a game. So during this time, even though of the lightness that came with it, I really took it seriously. And I started taking very, very close look at all my thought patterns, all my beliefs, all my behaviors, and most of all looking at my shadow. Like what's really in there behind all these protections. And so I started facing my shadow and I started using darkness and solitude and silence as my companions on this journey. And this is a journey that I've been on since then for many years now. And it is a journey that took me to the beautiful mountains of Thailand, where I met a range of profound masters and teachers. And I started learning from these masters and teachers and shaman and apprenticing with them and the medicines of the jungle. And so during all of these years, I spent all of this time with these people, and I've really tried to bring together all these Western practices, these Eastern esoteric practices, the medicines from the jungle, and really see how we can bring them together. Because I was so curious that what does it really mean to heal? Everybody talks about this healing and fixing, but what is it really about? Is there really anything to fix? Is there really anything to heal? Is it more just about getting rid of things, or growing, or expanding, or evolving? And what's really the precise process of this? So during these years, I've figured out a lot of things, and as I said, I've apprenticed with a lot of these medicines, specifically kambo, which is frog venom that induces a lot of detox. You purge a lot and you release a lot of energy and emotions, and it's a very uncomfortable medicine but a very beneficial one. I've also been working a lot with iboga, which in the West is known for its anti-addictive properties, but it does so much more. It's really everything. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this channel, is these different practices, how to bring them together, and how to do the real work, which is really the work of becoming yourself. Shedding all the layers and becoming yourself, becoming me, you becoming you, and all of us becoming who we really meant to be. Because you really can free yourself from this sometimes gloomy and dark environment that we have around us in today's day and age. We like to fill ourselves with hate, we like to divide ourselves, we like to point fingers at each other. And all of these things, they really stem from fear and from being lost. And so that is what we're going to talk about here on this channel. We're going to explore a bunch of different methodologies, different medicines, different practices of releasing and freeing ourselves. And so with that, I would just like to leave you with one little thought experiment, which is, what if you really gave it your all? What if you took all these beliefs, all these fears, all these things that are inside of you, your thoughts, and you just put them to the side, and you just do everything that you can to become the person that you need to be and to get the life that you really want to have? Because let me tell you this, if you put aside all of it and you just do what you need to do, it will happen. These years has been the most profound years of my life, and I can't even imagine what's to come. And trust me, whatever is on the other side is worth it. And so with that, I see you next time.